All right, shalom, shalom, shalom. Welcome again to another video review with your Akazaki Yahoo. As always, I'm joined by my most esteemed Akinanaya. Shalom, Aki.
Shalom, shalom, Aki. Shalom, shalom, Yasharal. Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shabarakatah.
Yahweh Bashem, the Most High, Yahweh, in the name of his beloved Son, Yahweh Shah, the Messiah, bless you. As always, I'm giving praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh Bashem Hamashiach wa Malak Yahweh Shah, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. Shalom wa Baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation under the Most High Power, under one covenant. All right, so we have this video review for you coming to us by the good brothers over at Black Journals. This is Jamaica's wildest secret history they never told you about. How many of y'all know about the Jamaican Maroons? Let's get to it here. Here we go.
The smoke rose first, long before the speeches, the flags, the jubilant crowds dancing in that August night of 1962, long before Jamaica became the first British colony in the Caribbean to cut the cord and claim its freedom. There were flames licking the edges of plantations, drums echoing from the mountains, and the sharp metallic taste of rebellion in the air. Jamaica's story began in fire, not ceremonial fire, but the kind that devours cane fields and sends overseers sprinting into the night with terror in their throats. Imagine it. A British overseer wakes in panic. The hillside is glowing red. Somewhere in the darkness, a conch shell blows, shrill, triumphant, defiant. That is the sound of maroon warriors on the hunt again, moving like shadows through the forest, a people who refuse to bow, refuse to break, refuse to die. Jamaica has always been wild, but not in the cheap, touristic sense of the word. It is wild in the way that sparks fly when steel hits stone, unyielding, unpredictable, and incandescent with memory. The island's past is not a straight timeline. It is a saga, a tangle of uprisings, betrayals, courage, cunning, and transformation. And at its heart sits one truth. Jamaica did not become free by accident. It fought ferociously for every inch of dignity. Before we journey into the chapter of this remarkable history, don't forget to support our works by only hitting the thumbs up button before you. Share video with friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening Black narrative, and kindly subscribe to stay tuned into the channel if you're yet to. To understand how Jamaica became the first British Caribbean colony to break its chains, you must first walk back through the chaos, starting not at the beginning, but in the middle of the storm. The year is 1730. British troops, tired, bitten by mosquitoes, disoriented in unfamiliar terrain, creep through the cockpit country. They have spent years fighting an enemy that refuses to line up neatly on a battlefield. Somewhere in these ridges is Cudjoe, the Maroon leader, whose raids have turned the empire into a fool. One officer writes that the mountains themselves seem alive with enemies, but he misnames the truth. These weren't mountains filled with enemies. They were mountains filled with people who would never again submit to slavery. How did it begin? Not with Britain, not even with Spain. The first notes of the tragedy go back to 1494, when Christopher Columbus sailed onto the island called Jamaica. Before his arrival, the said island was home to the peaceful Taino, a people who fished the turquoise waters so clear they looked carved from blue crystal, carved intricate zemis from wood, which were known as sacred carvings, played Beatty games beneath tall saber trees, and called the island Jamaica, the land of wood and water. In their world, nature was symphonic, time was gentle, and conflict was rare. They cultivated yucca, sweet potatoes, maize, beans, and other crops as their culture flourished, reaching its peak by the time of European contact. Some scholars estimate the Taino population may have reached more than 3 million on Hispaniola alone as the 15th century drew to a close, with smaller settlements elsewhere in the Caribbean. Whatever the number, the Taino towns described by Spanish chroniclers were densely settled, well-organized, and widely dispersed. The Indians were inventive people who learned to strain cyanide from life-giving yucca, developed pepper gas for warfare, devised an extensive pharmacopoeia from nature, built ocean-going canoes large enough for more than 100 paddlers, and played games with a ball made of rubber, which fascinated Europeans seeing the material for the first time. Although the Taino never developed a written language, they made exquisite pottery, wove intricate belts from dyed cotton, and carved enigmatic images from wood, stone, shell, and bone, until the Europeans arrived like a storm breaking glass, and then a paradise was evilly interrupted. This peaceful island had been too peaceful to survive the European appetite that followed Christopher Columbus like a shadow. What Columbus saw as opportunity was, for the Taino, the beginning of extinction. The Taino impressed Columbus with their generosity, which may have contributed to their undoing.
They will give all that they do possess for anything that is given to them, exchanging things even for bits of broken crockery.
He noted, upon meeting them in the Bahamas in 1492.
They were very well built, with very handsome bodies and very good faces. They do not carry arms or know them. They should be good servants.
Christopher Columbus did a combination of things that were unprintable, despicable, and in fact beyond wicked to the Tainos.
Christopher Columbus, one of the great European heroes, turns up on the island of Hispaniola. He was welcomed by the native people. They embraced them. They treated them with fantastic hospitality. His soldiers snatched babies from the breasts of their mothers and dashed their heads against the rocks. Children were fed alive to his dogs. Women's breasts were cut off. He decided to hang 13 of the Native Americans in Hispaniola to recreate the crucifixion of Jesus, plus the apostles. It's true that the majority of people died there of disease. Disease is introduced by the Europeans unwittingly, but many others were driven to death through overwork, direct murder, through starvation as their resources were taken away. Columbus insisted that everybody bring him a certain amount of gold, and those who failed to do so had their hands cut off. Some were sent back to their villages with their hands and their noses tied around their necks, having been amputated by his soldiers. And what he did there set the pattern for the genocidal extermination of almost all the Native American peoples.
Christopher Columbus and his men committed numerous atrocities against the Taino people, including enslavement, torture, mass murder, and sexual violence, as part of a campaign of settler colonialism and resource exploitation. While a major war and formal enslavement started in 1495, the brutal treatment was already prevalent by 1494. 1. There was enslavement and forced labor. Columbus established the first American colony at La Isabela on the north coast of Hispaniola in 1494. After a brief period of coexistence, relations between the newcomers and natives deteriorated. Spaniards removed men from villages to work in gold mines and colonial plantations. Columbus initiated the enslavement of the Tainos, forcing them to work in gold mines and on plantations. Refusal to work often resulted in brutal punishment. Columbus and his men would round up Arawak men, women, and children, and enclose 550 of them in pens and 4 caravels bound for the slave market of southern Spain during his second voyage to the New World. Approximately 200 perished on each journey during the passage, and their bodies were cast into the sea. After the survivors are sold as slaves in Spain, Columbus later writes, "Let us in the name of the Holy Trinity go on sending all the slaves that can be sold."
Let us in the name of the Holy Trinity go on sending all the slaves that can be sold.
2. There was mutilation and murder. The Spaniards, under the lead of Columbus, engaged in mass murder and torture. A particularly gruesome policy was the tribute system, where every Taino person over the age of 13 and 14 years was required to provide a certain amount of gold every 3 months, an impossible task since there is so little gold there. Failure to meet these demands, Columbus had their hands cut off and tortured. 3. There was sexual violence. The Spanish soldiers and settlers frequently raped Taino women, a practice described as genocidal rape. In time, many Taino women married conquistadors, combining the genes of the New World and Old World to create a new mestizo population, which took on Creole characteristics with the arrival of African slaves in the 16th century. By 1514, barely 2 decades after first contact, an official survey showed that 40% of Spanish men had taken Indian wives. The unofficial number is undoubtedly higher. 4. There was the abject use of force. The Spanish, utilizing superior weaponry and attack dogs, suppressed Taino resistance with extreme violence, butchering non-combatants and burning resistors at the stake. Bartolomé de las Casas, a young priest, witnessed many atrocities committed by Spaniards against native peoples. He later wrote, "I saw here cruelty on a scale no living being has ever seen or expected to see." Las Casas describes the treatment of natives thus: "Our work was to exasperate, ravage, kill, mangle, and destroy. Small wonder, then, if they tried to kill one of us now and then." Casas also made mention that the Spaniards were, each one, knifing the Tainos by their 10s and 20s just for fun, cutting slices off them to test the sharpness of their blades. What could be more cruel and insane? 5. Inhumane punishment and torture. The Spanish implemented collective punishment, burning down villages and destroying the Tainos' religious objects. While serving as the governor of Hispaniola, present-day Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, Columbus punished people by cutting off their ears and noses, and paraded women naked through the streets and sold them into slavery. 6. Starvation and disease. Deprived of their fields and traditional food sources due to forced labor and displacement, the Taino population suffered from widespread starvation and disease. Poor living conditions in forced labor camps exacerbated outbreaks of European diseases like smallpox, to which the Tainos had no immunity. Some committed suicide to avoid subjugation. Hundreds fell in fighting with the Spaniards, while untold numbers fled to remote regions beyond colonial control, leading to a massive population decline. These actions, along with subsequent colonial policies, led to the death of an estimated 80% to 90% of the Taino population within the first 30 years of contact, effectively resulting in their cultural extinction by the mid-16th century. Within a few decades, disease and enslavement had shattered the Taino population so completely that by the mid-1500s, even the Spanish priests wrote that the island felt haunted by a people erased, and by the time England wrestled Jamaica from Spain, the original inhabitants had been nearly erased from the earth. Their disappearance would leave an echo that still lives in place names: Yalas, Maima, Liguanea, and Anato Bay, ghosts of a civilization crushed beneath the boot of empire. The Spanish held the island for 161 chaotic years, importing enslaved Africans to replace the dying Taino labor force. But Jamaica's rugged mountains would become a sanctuary. African captives brought to the island ran from plantations into the mountains almost immediately. They escaped into the forests, forming the earliest communities of runaways, future Maroons. By the late 1500s, groups of these runaways, early ancestors of the Maroons, were already forming small, fierce communities deep in the forests of the cockpit country. The Spanish tried to hunt them. The runaways vanished into the limestone caves. The Spanish tried to smoke them out. The runaways ambushed them instead. Jamaica was already choosing its warriors. When the British arrived in 1655 to seize the island from Spain, they expected an easy conquest. What they got instead was a war they were never prepared for. As Spanish authority collapsed, hundreds more Africans escaped into the mountains, joining the runaways who already knew every secret of the terrain. By 1660, the British had control of the coasts, but the mountains belonged to another nation entirely. Something new had been born in the shadows, a community of escaped Africans, hardened by resistance and shaped by the rugged interior. The Maroons. These early Maroons, fierce, tactical, impossibly elusive, would become Jamaica's first architects of rebellion. The British, expecting to inherit a docile colony, had instead inherited a war. Resistance to slavery took on many forms in the American colonies. In Jamaica, Brazil, and Suriname, large numbers of enslaved Africans escaped and set up their own independent communities and kingdoms. By the 18th century, they were called Maroons, derived from the Spanish word cimarron, meaning wild and uncontrollable, the sort of terms colonial slaveholders would often use on blacks they could neither dominate nor control. The first Maroon War, in the 1730s, was a significant conflict in Jamaica between enslaved Africans who had escaped and established independent communities known as Maroons, and British colonial authorities. This conflict was rooted in a long history of resistance to slavery that began with the British takeover of Jamaica in 1655, leading to the formation of two primary Maroon societies resisting British rule: one, the Windward Maroons, and two, the Leeward Maroons. The Windward Maroons, or Eastern Society, led by the influential leader Queen Nanny from about 1725 to 1740, utilized guerrilla warfare tactics to challenge British forces, while the Leeward Maroons, which was led by Kojo, the anglicized spelling of Cudjoe, developed a cohesive community based on shared ethnic identity and heritage during the First Maroon War of the 1730s. Both groups bedeviled overly confident colonial commanders for more than a decade. Their struggle began, however, at least 80 years before the legendary contests of the 1730s. The Windward culture, in particular, prided itself on a long history of resistance to plantation slavery that stemmed from the English takeover of Jamaica from the Spanish in 1655, when Spanish settlers fled to Cuba in the wake of the British invasion. Most of their enslaved Africans and a handful of their free African subjects retreated to the remote and rugged interior of eastern Jamaica, away from the coastal towns and the new slaveholders in charge. These suddenly empowered Africans became the nucleus of the Windward Maroons. At first, they tried to use Spain against Britain, hoping that division among Europeans would guarantee their liberty. In the late 1650s, Africans sided with a few Spanish holdouts, led by Don Cristobal Arnaldo de Isasi. Every Spanish counterattack on British settlers featured armed Africans, yet the British knew early how to play divide and conquer as well, offering land and the official title of magistrate to one key Maroon leader, Juan Lubolo, or Juan de Bolas. Receiving 30 acres and the legal status of a free-born Englishman for his own Palenque community, Lubolo defected and betrayed other Maroons by giving the British valuable intelligence about their elusive whereabouts. Even though the Spanish holdouts would give up and leave when the new colonel of the Black Militia, Lubolo, collaborated, most of the other Maroons stepped up their hit-and-run attacks, eventually ambushing Lubolo and hacking his body to pieces. Juan de Ceres, the leader of the insurgents and the avenger of Lubolo, along with his successors, limited and delayed the expansion of sugar and slavery into the interior of eastern Jamaica. Soon, however, the plantocracy was fighting a two-front war, as slave revolts on newly cleared English plantations just south of Montego Bay and Falmouth escalated into a mass escape around 1690 to the inland cockpit country, the genesis of the Leeward Maroons. By the 1730s, Kojo emerged as their ruler, presiding over a Western African polity transplanted to the Caribbean and built on Akan, Asante, and Fanti traditions. This frontier kingdom drew its strength from its ethnic homogeneity and identity as a Cromanti, or Coromantine state. This identity stemmed from the original mass escape, in which all of the leaders either came through or had relatives pass through the English slave factory at the Fanti town of Cromantine on the African Gold Coast. Kojo's father was one of these leaders, and thus he bestowed a historical legitimacy upon his son, who then carried on the martial and militant reputation of Cromanti, and more specifically, Akan men. A constant flow of reinforcements came as the greed of Jamaican sugar planters made them prefer physically strong bondsmen from the Gold Coast, who joined the Leeward culture even more combat ready if they had survived the horrors of the Middle Passage and the seasoning, and if they had escaped scot-free into the mountains. By the 1730s, these fighters and their families had overcome interethnic rivalries, such as the Asante versus the Fanti, left over from the Old World, to unify as Cromanti against the British colonists. A new sense of a shared ethnicity and awful experiences heartened and strengthened the cohesion of Maroon communities in the West. In contrast, the Windward Maroons were more ethnically diverse and decentralized than their Western counterparts, but they were energized and unified after 1725 by an extraordinary woman, the famous Nanny. In addition to the original Spanish Maroons, the Windwards included a shipwrecked group from Madagascar and their progeny, and the Cromanti survivors of a widespread slave rebellion on the Grey Estate in Guanaboa Vale. Unlike Kojo's kingdom, this loosely tied confederation was more unfriendly toward new migrants, seeing them as potential spies and interlopers in their lands. Accordingly, even though they controlled more acres, they had fewer people. Yet it was the Akan and Asante, Cromanti, belief in the power of strong women as potential political and religious leaders that paved the way for the legendary and unifying leadership of Nanny, which still inspires extant Maroon communities on the island today. Queen Nanny, as she also was known, was born in what is now Ghana, probably in the 1680s, and emerged as a respected obeah, or spiritual director, by the 1720s. Imploring the help of ancestors, gods, and goddesses from all three camps of the Windwards, she became the Windwards' chief military strategist in the 1730s and reportedly trained her armies in the use of abeng, or cow horns, which signaled movements and feints over the valleys and hills of the east. Her armies lost once only. In 1734, British Captain Stoddart used new portable artillery to destroy Nanny Town, a fortified village at the top of a steep mountain, accessible only by one person at a time, along a very constricted winding trail that exposed climbers to snipers. The Windward Maroons regrouped a few miles away and then established New Nanny Town, or what became known as Moortown, which still exists. Land pressures forced the British to make a more concerted effort against their hard-to-pin-down foes, yet the Maroons' deployment of the abeng, coupled with their use of camouflage and botanical knowledge to disguise their scent from tracking dogs, frustrated one of the greatest empires in the world. For decades after 1655, the British attacked. The Maroons vanished into foliage. They set traps, ambushed patrols, freed the enslaved, and cut deep into plantation wealth. In the decades that followed, the island split into two realities. Down below, British planters flooded the land with sugar estates, turning Jamaica into one of the most profitable and most brutal colonial economies on Earth. By 1750, the island produced rivers of sugar and oceans of rum, all extracted from the labor of Africans who were whipped, chained, worked to collapse, and replaced without remorse. The average enslaved African on the plantation in question survived only 7 years after arrival. Death was cheaper than compassion. But up in the mountains, another Jamaica breathed. Hidden footpaths wound through dense forests where the British dared not go. In these shadowed territories lived the Maroons, led by warriors and strategists whose names would become legends. Men like Cudjoe and women like Nanny, whose enemies said she could read the forest like scripture and turn leaves into camouflage so flawless that soldiers stepped past her without seeing her eyes watching them from 2 inches away. The Maroon warriors were so very deadly that British soldiers whispered about Queen Nanny as if she were supernatural. Some claimed she caught bullets in her hand. Others insisted that she made herself invisible. One thing was certain, her strategies were years ahead of the Empire trying to crush her. By the early 1700s, the battles between the Maroons and the British had grown into a full-scale guerrilla war. British regiments marched into the hills in tightly formed lines. The Maroons broke those lines like twigs. Muskets cracked, ambushes erupted. Entire squads disappeared into ravines from which only echoes of dying white soldiers returned. The war dragged on, 1710, 1720, 1730. Each year, the British threw more soldiers, more money, more frustration at the problem. Each year, the Maroons grew stronger, bolder, more deeply rooted. Tropical fevers such as malaria and yellow fever, as well as poor intelligence and impossible logistics, gave both the Leeward and Windward cultures great advantages over the British, as many soldiers fresh from Europe died before ever meeting their enemy. Ambushes made things worse for the British. Their first attempt to destroy Nanny Town in 1732 under Governor Robert Hunter failed because of repeated surprise attacks. Despite their strategic advantages, including the use of ambushes and local knowledge of the terrain, the Maroons faced increasing pressure from British forces and hired mercenaries. Finally, in 1738 and 1739, something extraordinary happened, something almost unthinkable in the height of the British imperial era. The British sued for peace. They conceded defeat, signing treaties with the Maroons, recognizing their autonomy and granting them land and freedom in perpetuity, a humiliating admission that no amount of imperial might could conquer Jamaica's interior. For the first time in Atlantic colonial history, a major European empire formally acknowledged the sovereignty of formerly enslaved Africans who had fought their way to independence. Outside help had forced the Maroons to the bargaining table, though. Throughout 1738 and 1739, the British would hire Mosquito Indian mercenaries from coastal Central America, fierce fighters who were less prone to the malaria and yellow fever that so plagued European soldiers not used to the tropics. They also did uncover the remote and hidden villages of the Maroons by using their time-honored tracking techniques. About the same time, the British invited Spanish chasseurs, bounty hunters, from Cuba, and their crack bloodhounds trained in finding runaway slaves. The British had also armed slaves and troops of free blacks to fight the Maroons in both the East and West. However, the Maroons had fought on, resiliently, not hiring nor needing any extra forces but themselves, despite the casualties they did suffer at some point. They were mean and indestructible, a people these colonial Europeans have never encountered in their covetous escapades and terrorism. The British strategy of arming slaves and free blacks poisoned any possible united African front against slavery. Maroons in both the West and the East now felt no obligation to help the enslaved, closing their communities to any new fugitives. By the 1750s, to stave off land-hungry planters, both the Leeward and Windward Maroons eagerly became paid slave catchers, providing the isolated kingdoms with much-needed revenues. This role preserved British rule at key junctures, including Tacky's Rebellion of 1760, Jamaica's largest slave rebellion on the eve of emancipation in 1832, and the largest uprising of peasants after emancipation in 1865. Maroon help was the only thing that saved the day for the outnumbered British in Jamaica. The cornerstones of this new strange alliance were the treaties of 1739 and 1740, which gave both the Windward and Leeward Maroons limited autonomy in return for helping against future rebellions or with future runaways. But freedom in the hills did not free the plains. The plantations had continued with their cruel exploitation and oppression. Those engines of sugar, wealth, and cruelty continued to define the coastline and plains. By the mid-18th century, Jamaica supplied Britain with unprecedented profits. Every spoonful of sugar melted in London tea rooms carried traces of Jamaican sweat and Jamaican screams. Jamaica had become the beating heart of British wealth and the breaking point of African bodies. Enslaved Africans lived under a system designed to break the body and destroy the will. But even under the lash, resistance brewed. Small revolts, slow poisonings, secret plots, coded drum rhythms, and night meetings in the cane. Then, on December 1831, the island ignited. It began as a peaceful strike, but quickly spread into the largest rebellion in Jamaica's history. Samuel Sharp, a Baptist deacon who understood both scripture and strategy, sparked what became known as the largest rebellion in the history of Jamaica, where up to 60,000 enslaved people had risen in coordinated defiance. Plantations burned across St. James, Trelawney, and Hanover. British planters fled in terror. Sharp's plan to force the British into abolishing slavery succeeded even in failure. Though the revolt was crushed, Parliament could no longer pretend the system was sustainable. Sharp was captured and hanged in 1832, but the revolt shook Britain so violently that it hastened the abolition of slavery itself. By August 1st, 1834, slavery was legally abolished, and full emancipation followed in 1838. But emancipation is not the same as equality. Freed Jamaicans found themselves trapped in a new prison, landless, underpaid, shut out from political participation. Jamaica entered the mid-1800s with a population freed on paper, but trapped by poverty and a colonial system designed to keep them powerless. For a generation, they pushed against colonial walls that refused to budge. Desperation finally exploded on October 1865, when Paul Bogle, a farmer and Baptist deacon, led a march into Morant Bay, demanding justice for a people crushed by taxes, poverty, and courtroom bias. Colonial authorities responded with lethal force. The repression was extremely ruthless. Executions, burnings, reprisals so extreme that they shocked even politicians in London. But repression cannot kill memory. Morant Bay became a wound that would not heal, a warning, a prophecy, and eventually a catalyst. Bogle's rebellion, like Sharp's before it, had forced Jamaica into a new direction. The British Crown abolished the old assembly and tightened direct rule, thinking they could suppress the political awakening they had inadvertently sparked. But the island had already become too self-aware to sleep again. By the early 20th century, Jamaica's cry for dignity took new shape as it bred thinkers who refused to accept colonial destiny. Marcus Garvey, born in 1887, has begun thundering black pride across the island and the world. He electrified Jamaican consciousness by 1910s and 1920s, urging black people to reclaim pride, identity, and destiny. His message cracked open the psychological chains of the empire. A new generation rose, thinkers, laborers, activists, leaders who believed that Jamaica could govern itself. The 1930s labor strikes shook the colonial order even further, compelling reforms that opened the pathway to political participation. From these upheavals emerged two towering figures, Norman Manley and Alexander Bustamante, cousins whose visions would reshape the nation. They pushed for universal adult suffrage in 1944, gained internal self-government in 1959, and prepared the ground for the ultimate strike against the empire. The fever of independence built steadily through the early 1960s, humming beneath every conversation, every rally, every radio broadcast. Jamaicans knew the chains were already broken. They simply waited for the key to fall. Then came the night. On that night of August 5th, leading into dawn, on August 6th, 1962, Kingston pulsed with electricity. Tens of thousands gathered as the Union Jack slipped down the pole for the last time. And then, at exactly midnight, as the Jamaican flag rose, the crowd's roar swallowed the city. Fireworks clawed at the sky. Drums throbbed like ancestral hearts awakening. The mountains, those same mountains that once sheltered Maroon fighters, seemed to breathe. An island carved by conquest, rebellion, blood, and unyielding will had declared itself free. Not granted freedom, not gifted freedom, but earned freedom through centuries of defiance. Jamaica's history is not a calm river. It is a wildfire, sometimes controlled, often unpredictable, always alive. From the first Maroon strongholds in the 1600s to the independence celebrations of 1962. It is a story stitched together by people who refused to surrender their humanity, even when the empire demanded it. Jamaica's story is not merely a history, it is a declaration, a reminder that even on the smallest patch of earth, a people armed with memory, courage, and unbreakable spirit can shake empires, rewrite destiny, and rise unchained. From the bushfires of the Maroons to the bright dawn of independence, Jamaica stands as living proof that freedom is never given. It is seized again and again by those who refuse to bow. In closing, Jamaica had done what many believed impossible. It became the first British Caribbean colony to win independence. More than just an island, Jamaica is a saga of survival, a blueprint for resistance, a testament to the unstoppable force of a people who refuse to be erased. From Maroon bullets in the forest, to plantation uprisings, to global Black consciousness, to raising its own flag, Jamaica's history is not just wild, it is majestic, volcanic, mythic, and unforgettable. Although the world sees Jamaica's culture today, reggae, sport, food, swagger, but behind it stands a legacy carved out of war, courage, and unshakable pride. The island that began with fire in the hills ended with fireworks in the sky, and its story, wild and unbroken, continues to burn, bright as ever. That brings us to the end of yet another video segment.
All right. All praise to the Most High. Man, this was some interesting information. First thing I want to talk about is the traitor. What is up with our people and betraying their own people? I don't understand. This is madness.
God.
Like, is there... Good grief. I mean, why? What could possibly provoke a man to turn against his own people and go to the adversary? That makes absolutely no sense. You are not going to get anything for that. That little bit they're giving you, they can take it away anytime. You are really setting yourself up for destruction, not even from your people, from them. Here's the crazy thing. Let me say this because this needs to be understood. These other people, these Europeans, they don't value betrayal because they don't want to be betrayed. So you betray your own people and think you're going to go to them and they're going to be happy with that? No, they're going to always see you as a traitor. You betrayed your people, it's only a matter of time before you betrayed us. That's how they see things. But for some odd reason, so-called black people, Negroes, always find a way to betray other Negroes and turn to the enemy. It's senseless. We need to learn that lesson. That is a fail, double fail, triple fail for anybody who would try or even think about such. It's not going to work anyway. That was one big thing. They talked about the mountains. The mountains. You know, I've been in Jamaica once. I was there for about 3 days, and of course, back then everybody wanted to go to Kingston, and no, they said no, you're not going to Kingston because they couldn't guarantee our safety in Kingston. So the resort wasn't going to be responsible for that. What else did he talk about? Yeah, I wasn't familiar with the. I didn't see any mountains when I was over there. I did see some mansions, and I thought these guys must be the people who are making things happen. But it was dynamic to see how that all came together. I really hate that the woman who was the general they called Queen. She brought in a whole lot of idol worship. You know, if ever our people would just follow the Most High, would just depend on the Most High, the power of Israel, I mean, things would be so good for us. We will be in a position unlike anything that you could imagine, truthfully. But for some odd reason, we always seem to get into idolatry. And back then, and I'm sure some over there, I don't know, maybe today or not long ago. But these are things I want us to learn from. Those are our people over there. You know, the only difference between them and us, they brought them over to Jamaica the same way they brought us over here. So there's no difference in between us. So, you know, if you've been over there, if you go over there, it's cats that look like you, it's cats that look like myself, it's cats that look like anybody you know. I mean, it's the same thing, same story. We are scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, and you're going to see our people wherever you go. I guarantee it. No matter what country, what island, you're going to see our people there. It was somebody said it last. What was that? Okay, I have to look this up. But what was the date that they raised that flag that they celebrated that independence? I can't recall it, but I'll look that up because that's something I wanted to highlight. I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's all I got on that. So, but go ahead, Aki.
Con, I was unaware of a lot of this information that we've covered this evening.
Yeah.
Some really great history, some troubling history that that we encounter far too often, and you addressed it. The way that we turn on one another.
Yeah.
That wasn't a win. Hunting down runaway slaves for the oppressor is not a win. I think about what could have been if time and time again brothers would stick together.
Man.
We have the oppressor on the run.
Yeah.
We could have reversed what has happened. Now a lot of this is divine will also, but I'm not sure what stirs up in a brother's spirit to want to appease and please someone who hates you,
Yeah,
you know,
it's crazy.
someone who would, do terrible things to you, how do we get it in our mind, man, that we're going to make this individual or these people happy, by turning on someone who not only looks like me but has the same struggles as me. It don't make sense to me.
It's senseless. It's got to be a spiritual thing. But I'm gonna go ahead, Aki.
Yeah, I would agree. I would definitely agree. But yeah, some real good history there. And we had covered it back a few weeks ago for the Haitian Revolution.
Right.
There was one of these brothers, one of these Maroon brothers that was giving them so much trouble there in Jamaica that they deported him to Haiti. And what's he do when he gets to Haiti? He starts a revolution. He starts the Haitian Revolution. That individual being Dutty Dutty Bookman, Dutty Bookman. And you can look him up and check him out. I wonder what it would have been like, you know what I mean, to I think those Maroons took on a life that was similar to the way that our ancestors lived, coming up out of harsh bondage in Mizraim, dwelling in booths, living off the land. These Maroons were doing the same thing and getting accustomed to the land and giving the oppressor grief.
Right.
You know what I mean? I can imagine these British soldiers going into the jungle knowing that they're probably not coming out. You know what I mean? And just being frightened by what's hiding in the jungle waiting on you, you know?
Right.
But yeah, this really makes me wants me to learn more. Also makes me want to visit Jamaica again. But like you said, those are indeed our people over there, and we have a lot of brothers and sisters of Jamaican descent here in the States. A lot of West Indians here in the States, and I would say that probably on a small scale, you had Maroons just about everywhere. We know that there were Maroons in Florida and in South Carolina that started what they called the Seminole War, but what we've later learned was the Gullah War. The Gullah Wars, which were our people. So yeah, this really is like a rabbit hole. You start digging into it and just uncovering more information and wanting to learn more. But I'll yield there.
And it's ironic because it all ties back together. So here in Haiti, you'll find a connection to Jamaica. You'll find a connection to us here, and then of course we all go back to most of us to West Africa, some to other parts of of a Kevy line. But I mean, we're all greatly intertwined. You know what I'm saying? Even though they had their struggles on their area, we had our struggles in our area. But man, I kind of hate I wasn't of the people that had to get up out of there. You know what I'm saying? Had to get them about despite them till they quit. And that was another thing I wanted to address, but I didn't. But man, how they became catchers at the end. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
like, that was horrible. So yeah, we got to get some kind of we got the code. I was gonna say we got to get some kind of a code to get that we're gonna adhere to, but we got the code. It's called Torah. Surprise. Had it for thousands of years, and it should have been what governs us and keeps us situated. But what's happened is we've had people branch off and go off and do so many other things. All right, before I close this out, I'm gonna give y'all a little bit of a treat here. You know, you'll be working with music and whatnot, and I got a little treat, a little surprise. Let me put this little secret thing up here. That's not gonna work. Let me put this one up. All right, I'm gonna put that up there, but I'm gonna I'm gonna give y'all just a little bit of sample here. So there's something for you all to enjoy. I'm not gonna play this whole thing. I'm just gonna play a little bit of it. But this is about the Jamaican Maroons and those are Blue Mountain Soldiers. So check it out.
Yeah. Jamaican Maroons, Blue Mountain Soldiers, ran from the chains, came back as commanders. Empire tried hard, but never could hold us. Freedom was taken, not signed by imposters. Jamaican Maroons, drums in the rain, a bang and cry to the valley and flame. Mountains are fortress, war in the terrain, unconquered bloodline, remember the name.
All right, that's all I'm gonna give you on that one. I'm gonna have to wait till that come out because that's a whole nother situation and circumstance there. But praises to the Abba. Yeah, this was definitely a very good historical plunge. And big shout out to Black Journals. Man, they do some magnificent work on putting these videos together and getting them out for the people. And we appreciate it so much. So much good information. And man, a lot for us to talk about and to think about and to consider. Greatly appreciate it. But praises to the Most High. We'll go ahead and close this on out. Now we do all of this for a very specific purpose. Why do we do it? Romans chapter 10 and verse 1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to Ha'abba for Israel is that they might be saved. We want to see our people saved. We want to see our people set free. We want to see our people restored to the prominence that the Most High have promised us. How are we going to do it? First of all, we're going to keep the faith and the belief in the Messiah, Hamashiach, to come back and restore us as the Most High have said. Also, second thing, Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important to understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged on whether we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments. Why? Because this is the whole duty of man. I am once again your Akazaki Yahoo, and as always, joined by my most esteemed Kenaniah. We give praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shah, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who were scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom, Wa, Baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. Until that day come, Shalom, family.
Shalom, Ms. Pekah.
All praises to the Most High. Praise you, Abba Yah. Kwam Yasha'Allah.
Kwam Yashala.
And Barak Hashem Yahweh.